But she can be a wet boat though, Brian.
Very wet indeed. I'm Brian Corbett, I'm 75. I sail my little boat Winifred all around the UK. I bought Winifred in May 2012, quite close to the beginning of the month, and 2 days before my first regatta. I collected her in Somerset. My first regatta was on the Clyde up at Garlock, and of course I had to be there on the Saturday morning. The boat wasn't quite ready on the Thursday afternoon. I had to stay over with the previous owner and set off on the Friday afternoon. So of course I drove pretty well mostly through the night. Arrived on the Clyde in the fairly early hours of Saturday morning. Met my new crew, who was a naval architect, very confident young lad called Joe. I had to explain to him he knew as much about the boat as I did, because I'd never had a trial sail. So we set up, this was the McGrew Regatta in 2012, very much a celebration of the family, and it was the same, a good collection of McGrew boats, but Gordon, who organised the regatta, was so pleased to have a Herreshoff. He was the only Herreshoff, possibly the only Herreshoff on the Clyde at that particular time. I mean, it was, there aren't that many Herreshoff designs, but pretty well every other major, especially the Clyde designers, Fife, Milne, J.L. Watson, they were all well represented in the regatta, so the organiser was well pleased to have Winifred come along.
And tell me, I mean, you trailer her all over the country, don't you?
Yes. I mean, I do like to go up to Scotland. Sadly, we haven't had an actual classic event in Scotland since 2013, but I still take her up there. We had the old Gaffer's 50th anniversary rally, Round Britain Rally, and what I did was to trailer up to Loch Melfort. We had the most beautiful weather. A lot of my friends in the old Gaffers from the East Coast had taken 2 months to get there. They'd set off from Malden in the 21st of April, taken them 2 months through the most appalling weather. And one of the owners said to me, "You realise what we've been through together? You've just done it in 10.5 hours in beautiful sunshine." That's the advantage of a trailer sailor. But yes, I sail in regattas pretty well around the whole of the coast. Falmouth is probably the furthest west, but Foy Classics I've done. I do regattas twice a year in Plymouth, on Plymouth Sound. Big advantage for Winifred there is that the water is flat. You get strong winds but flat water. And of course she's very light, she only weighs just over 400 kilograms, so those conditions are ideal for her. I usually do the Yogaff, the old Yarmouth Gaffers Festival at the end of May beginning, and then that starts my quest down to the West Country.
And you do the Cowes regattas and the new one, the Hamble Classic Regatta. Yes,
I usually bring her home around about the end of June, just for a couple of weeks, get her ready for Cowes Classics. Cowes Classics really is my major event. It's, to be honest, it's just like Cowes Weeks used to be in the 50s and 60s. It's a wonderful family occasion. It's, I think the social whirl in the evening probably needs as much of an adrenaline rush as the actual sailing does. And being that time in usually round about the middle of July, we can, on the odd occasion, lose a day because there's no wind. On the other occasion, we could lose a day because there's too much wind. But generally speaking, I really enjoy that week in Winifred. I have to say, the Bramble Bank is a very wet place for Winifred because there's always a short, choppy sea, even if there's little wind. So obviously Winifred, being so light, falls into little holes in the water, and I do spend quite a lot of time pumping out. I have a little power pump, but of course it always stops just at the crucial time when the wind starts to blow, such as the way of modern technology. That's about the only bit of the modern technology on Winifred. She's a replica of a Herreshoff freighter that was brought over to Cowes to race on the Solent in 1892. Brought over for a lady, lovely lady called Winifred Sutton. hence my replica of her boat is called Winifred. Winifred had the nerve to win pretty well every half-rater race for 5 seasons starting in 1892. As you can imagine, the male members of the squadron, not that there were female members in those days, the squadron were not at all happy about the impudence of this lady winning all of these races. Yes, I mean, she's a half-rater. Herreshoff designed her as a half-rater. The rater system was a rule which was very much alive at the end of the 19th century, the early part of the 20th century, before the international meter rule, the first form of the international meter rule came out. They tended to be built, half-rater was the smallest, and I believe they went up to something in the order of about 25 rater. Certainly a lot of the boats were just scaled up. So interestingly, you could have a five rater, which could be somewhere in the order of about 38 foot long, would look exactly the same as a blown up version of Winifred. And of course that's very extreme, very long overhangs, very light construction. Generally speaking, the raters, half raters and the smaller ones, they only usually lasted about 2 or 3 seasons, because a new design came out and those older boats would have been scrapped. Of course, Winifred has the advantage of, instead of being traditionally built, she's built at strip cedar and then epoxied inside and out. So of course it's a bit like a monocoque construction, rather like the racing cars of the 50s. So she is very strong. Although you can see frames in her construction, the frames really are more for show rather than the actual strength. My particular reason for buying Winifred, I've always loved classic wooden boats, and I thought, well, the best way to see them is to be out there in a small version, so that I actually race with them. I started sailing about 60 years ago, and spent quite a lot of the time crewing on a one-rater, Menai Straits one-rater. She was such a beautiful boat. In all those 60 years, I can't really think of another boat that came anywhere close to her, possibly with the exception of the odd 6 metre that I'm sailing. But the one-rater, she's actually still alive and kicking in the Norfolk Broads. So I was looking for a boat very similar to the one-rater. Winifred actually is 24 feet, is probably slightly longer than most half-raters. There's a class up in the northwest and North Wales that I used to sail in regularly called the seabed half-raters, and although they rate exactly the same as Winifred, they weigh 1.5 tons, so 3 times the size, 3 times the weight. They have a centreboard, big steel centreboard. They have iron ballast in the bottom, so as you can see, a very much more of a seaboat than Winifred. And certainly we used to sail our half-raters from the Mersey down to the Menai Straits. It didn't matter what the weather threw at us, they were excellent with the seaboats. So that rating system was a very extreme one, and as I say, ultimately it was replaced in the early 1900s by the international meter rule. I mean, for a 24'6", her beam is only 4'6", so I mean that is so narrow. She looks like a cigar sailing on the water. She actually draws 3 foot. She's got a fin keel, quite a small fin keel, but with a great big lead bulb on the bottom of the keel.
I mean, what is it about her that really you fell in love with?
To be honest, Bob, there weren't too many available. There's another beautiful little half-rater called Diamond, which is a Civic design. A lot of these boats were built by Fife, were designed by Fife and other designers, but as I say, they were built very lightly, so there aren't too many of these, what they call skimming dish half-raters. There aren't too many of them left. But I have to say, if I was to show you a photograph of Merwis, the one-rater that I sailed all those years ago, there's a remarkable similarity. The only real difference is Winifred is a high-peak gaff rig, whereas Merwis and probably most of the one-raters on the Menai Straits and the Royal Mersey, they were mostly gun-turret boats. But great similarity, so that was my main reason. She just reminded me of the Merwis, the original one-rater.